All right. Mic check. Good. So I'm Max Ceron. CWB Association Welding podcast. Today we have a really cool guest. Welding podcast.
The show is about to begin.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the CWB Association podcast. My name is Max Ceron, and as always, I'm out there trying to find the great stories that really unify our wonderful industry in this country. Today, I have a great story and a great person here that I think is something that's very important to us in our industry and to Canadians in general. And we have Kerri Deir coming to us from the Canadian Council on Rehabilitation and Work, the CCRW. Kerri, how are you doing today?
I'm great, Max. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
So the title of the company, I think kind of gives a framework of what it is that you do. I have we were talking before, and you're an accessibility consultant with the CCRW. So let's start first with what is the CCRW, and then what an accessibility consultant does there.
Great questions. So CCRW, the Canadian Council of Rehabilitation and Work, they're a national not-for-profit organization. So we have hubs all across Canada, from your end in Vancouver all the way to my end here in St. John's. And we work with people with disabilities to help get gainful and meaningful employment. So we help individuals to do various things, make them more job ready, help work on essential skills, soft skills, resume building, interview techniques, and try to do a lot of interaction between them and the employer to make them the best employee that they can be. And as an accessibility consultant, I have a special niche in that I work with apprentices in red seal trades. But as an accessibility consultant, I interact with the apprentices in order to see what barriers there may be, whether that's in school or in work or some sort of personal life that's preventing them from getting to that red seal trade designation.
So within your company, when you say that you specialize with apprentices and red seals, which is, that's kind of where we're going to go specifically with our conversation with welding. But what does the rest of the consultants do? Like, are we talking about kind of dealing with supports and upskilling and all that stuff for everything? Like how wide is the breadth of this organization's portfolio?
Absolutely. So we deal with many different people, and there's so much diversity and disability, so it's really hard to say, right? 27% of Canadians identify with having at least one disability. So when we look at what disability is, we're able to help assess what an accommodation might be for that individual. So maybe somebody has a learning difference, and when they're dealing with their employer, they just need things written down differently or something of that nature. Or maybe the person has a physical disability where they need to have crutches, or they need to have a chair that they have to sit and have breaks. Upskilling that you mentioned, absolutely. We really try to help people be at the best of their ability, so their resume is good and they're really reaching out to get to their best ability. They're not saying, "Oh, I'll just do this job because I can." They're like, no, we try to enable them to say,
they can do more.
I can do more, and we're here to help you with that. We can help you with the supports, whether it may be tutoring, or it may be something physical, or maybe it is that upskilling. Whatever that may be, we work on a one-on-one basis with individuals, and it's all individual support. So, I could have two people who tell me that they have the same disability, but their supports look completely different, and their journey is completely different.
Now, you threw a statistic out there that it's phenomenal. When I first met you a few weeks back in our first meeting, you said, you said this, and it stuck with me. And I wrote it down then, and I wrote it down again just now. But 27% of Canadians identify with some form of disability. There's a few things to take apart in there that I want to ask. First of all, that probably doesn't even capture the reality, because that's only the people that will self-declare, because most of this is done through self-declaration. Some is done through institutions, schools coming up, maybe early identification through elementary schools or programs, but many go through life, especially in the past, adults now, without any type of understanding that there may have been a need for an accommodation, and they may not be, identifying. So, in your opinion, what does that 27% perhaps maybe actually look like? Would you like? I mean, that's already 1 in 4, right? That's 1 in 4.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I mean, that's 20. That's over 10 million. What is it? 10 million Canadians, right? I don't imagine you have 10 million clients.
And we don't. And you're right.
Right?
But I think you're so true. And like looking at that number, that self-declaration. I will also say that in that 27%, 80% are invisible disabilities, non-visible. So you can't even tell, right? So if you look in a room and you have 100 people, 27 have some sort of disability, but 80% of those 27, you would never even be able to tell. So there's a lot of masking, there's a lot of hiding. People hide behind the stigma of being afraid to say, hey, I have a disability, or hey, I have a barrier. And they don't realize that there's so many things that can be done to help. When you mentioned the word accommodation, 10 years ago, or even now, I talk to people and people are like, an accommodation. You're going somewhere, you're going to a hotel for the night. They're expecting a continental breakfast to follow along with that. And so a lot of it is educating, right? It's educating our potential employees, right? Our clients, our employers, about what does disability look like, because it is so different for everybody. And one thing that we really try to hit on is disability confidence. So how do we make people confident in their disability, or confident to be able to have somebody with a disability on their team or as their employee? And we just came out with a fantastic disability confidence toolkit that's readily available for employers. And it's fantastic. And I'm not just saying that because it's CCRW's toolkit.
Did you build it? No.
No, I did not. But I'm really happy to be able to give it as a tool, because I think we're finally at that stage where people are saying, you know what? Yeah, like people have disabilities here in my workplace, and I need to be able to accommodate that. And I need to be able to help them bring their best self to work. And if they're bringing their best self, right, the employee's happy, the employer's happy, and overall, it's a better feeling, right? You have that inclusion, you have everything right there. And are we going to do it perfect the first time? Probably not. But by taking the chance, by being okay with maybe messing up sometimes with the accommodation, whatever that is.
You don't need any type of disability to make a mistake.
Absolutely.
Like, this is just human nature.
Yes. And sorry. And what I'm saying is that, like, for the employer or even coworkers to be like, oh, maybe I'll say something wrong, or maybe I'll do the wrong thing. It's okay. Right. We all say things maybe sometimes that, is not maybe how we should say it, but we go back and we figure that out and we work together. And that's really what this disability confidence toolkit does. It looks at accommodation. It looks at onboarding. It looks at how can we make it the best for everybody, with or without a disability, to be honest, just for everybody.
Right. And you talk about the, invisible disabilities. I mean, that's something I think that, number one, it's always existed. Like, it's just like, this isn't new. There's sometimes these conversations of like, now in the world, we're dealing with these problems, and now we have to, well, that's more of a fault of history than of any type of plan, because it should have always been kind of something that we just could work with. And I remember when I started teaching, coming from industry, going into the education system, I had to wrap my head around, even the term accommodation. Like you said, it can be kind of misleading. If I see a person with a broken leg and they're walking with a crutch, I don't go up to them and ask them why they have a crutch, even though it's an accommodation. That's a very obvious thing. It's like, oh, that helps you walk until you can heal. Okay, I get it. I wear eyeglasses. I have a vision impairment. Well, that's my accommodation so I can see properly. These are like the low-hanging fruit that people are like, oh, well, I never thought of those things as accommodations, or a diabetic needing insulin at a certain time, or all these things that can happen that are like easy to see, easy to discriminate, easy to judge. what about the 80% that's not easy to see and not easy to judge and not easy to understand when you think someone is, quote unquote, they're normal, but underneath their exterior, they're really suffering and trying to work through something and doing it in silence, which is the worst thing that anyone can do, right? What can we do about that, or what does your organization think might be like some steps that people can do to start looking at that differently?
Yeah, so we try to really use what we call an intersectional lens, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, you mentioned the fact that people may have a disability that's invisible, but also think about all the other things. Say, for example, maybe equity priority groups, we would call them. So
Mm-hmm.
women, Indigenous, people of the LGBTQ plus community, newcomers, and you add all these things into maybe sometimes having a disability as well, and how much more that can impact, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we're saying if you just step back, and you'll see this in the toolkit as well, if you just step back and just see where they're coming from, right? Try to understand where it is that they may need a little help. And a lot of times people get scared, employers get scared by an accommodation. Oh, this is going to cost me too much, or this is going to lead to too much sick time, or this or this. They get worked up.
Mm-hmm.
I helped a lady not too long ago. She was having issues with a tape measure, just quickly looking at a tape measure, being able to read, the actual measurement on there. We spent $35 and got her one that has a digital readout at the top. It was a $35 accommodation. And now she can bring her true self to work. She feels like she has that confidence. She knows she's not going to mess up these numbers. So she doesn't have that anxiety. And that was the smallest $35 accommodation. And sometimes it doesn't even have a price tag. Sometimes it's just, a little bit more communication or trying to encourage people in different ways. So it doesn't always have to be a price tag that goes along with that.
A financial piece, yeah.
Exactly.
Or a physical thing, yeah.
Absolutely. Now,
in terms of apprenticeships now, talking specifically to where you work, that is something, obviously, we're in a welding podcast here. We're a national not-for-profit trying to help the industry survive. And, we're going to have 50,000 retirements over the next 10 years. And we already got almost a 20,000 person job shortage today. And we are running around trying to find ways to get more people into the industry. And this seems like a very, are a great way to connect two worlds that seem to need each other. When I was coming up in the welding industry, it was always this thought that the welders were kind of the misfits of society, and the trades are kind of these misfits. We weren't cut out for academia, and we weren't we're good with working with our hands, which I 100% try to break those biases because I don't necessarily believe them. But I will say that there is probably a grain of truth in there, that the same people that love to work with their hands and love to be creative and love to do those types of jobs are the same people that don't like sitting at a desk and don't like being at a 4-hour lecture and have no interest in spending 4 years in university. So there is an intersectionality between those worlds. Now, when you look at people on the disability spectrum, which is wide and can be, many, many different things, how many, there's probably a great section of those people that would fit in so wonderfully in the industrial trades world that we would love to have them and need them, right? How do we get that message out? How do we help them? What do we do?
Absolutely. Well, that's a lot of what we've been trying to do, is really trying to educate what is a disability, right? There's still a lot of old school thinking. I spoke to someone just a bit over a year ago who told me that there's no disabilities on their construction site because they could never have someone in a wheelchair on a ladder. So I knew then at that point that I had a lot of work to do in some areas, just explaining what
That's
a
an
disability.
oddly specific thing that to pick.
Yeah, right. But I think in his mind that a disability was, just that. He just pictured somebody that was in a wheelchair, and that can be that, but it's not always that.
Mm-hmm.
And the reasons, we're a federally funded program, and the reason it began was that 43% of people who begin their apprenticeships never complete. So why is that?
Mm-hmm.
So we really started, please, let us help you anyone who's already within their apprenticeship. We just helped someone just before Christmas. He was 21 years in his apprenticeship. He just kind of never got around to it. But then also he was scared because he took so long with his hands on the tools and avoided the last full piece of writing that Red Seal trade exam. And he was kind of stuck. He's like, I need help. So we were able to help him with tutoring. We were able to help him with a study plan, and he was able to be successful in that. There's a lot of people who are kind of stuck at that in-between stage, somewhere in between, that aren't getting to that finish. So not only are we trying to help people who have some sort of disability get into the trades, we're also looking at who are the people that are in the trades who do have a disability or do have a learning difference or a barrier or whatever that may be, that's preventing them from finishing that Red Seal trade designation, and really trying to educate through things like this. We have great relationships with a lot of trade schools and colleges, universities, unions, and really great community partners and great networking there, with trying to be able to just say, hey, these are the resources we have. They're great wraparound supports. We're trying to help people, and we're trying to really help Canada with that skilled trades gap, and how can we all work together.
Now, when I was teaching, we would have students come in with accommodation plans at a high school. These are, kids that have been coming up through the system and have been getting, to some degree or another, accommodations to help them with their journey in education. They end up in trade school, excited to be welders, and, first day of school, we get their accommodation plans. And as a teaching institution, we can manage that. We're in a safe environment. We're 12 students at a time to one teacher. And with the accommodations we have, at the college I was teaching at SAS Polytech, I don't know if they ever reached out to CCRW, but we had people that would come in to help with the accommodations and stuff like that. But those were the people that already had a plan, and a plan had been set up for them prior. What if someone walks in the door to a training center anywhere in Canada, no plan, no nothing, and maybe even unaware that they may even have a disability that has been hindering them for a while? How would an instructor or a teacher that's listening to this podcast say, oh, maybe I should start reaching out to someone, or maybe I need to make a connection here? What do I do?
Absolutely. So it happens a lot. It happens a lot, right? And especially, as you would know, when these apprentices are going into their blocks, it's a 6 to 8 week block. It's fast forward. It's go, go, go. If you're finding out on the first or second day that this student has a learning disability or has an issue, and now you're going to try to get everything pieced together to get, it makes it really hard. So always having that plan beforehand is great. It doesn't always happen. So anyone can reach out to CCRW at any time. I'm happy to do webinars. We have people across the country. So we're happy to have people go into institutions, that sort of thing. The issue is that a lot of times people will be on job sites, and they may have worked for many years, and now all of a sudden they're coming in. They don't have that little special accommodation plan that they got from high school. They're 35 years old. And they're like, I can't read that. I might be dyslexic. And they're not even sure. So we're trying to, really help them as much as we can. I will say one great thing about CCRW as well is we go with the social model of disability. So if you tell me, Max, that you can't read and that you think you may be dyslexic or whatever that may be, then we go with that. I don't need you to go and have an expensive test or have a doctor's note. Exactly. Assessment. It's nope. Okay, this is what it is. This is the barrier that we're dealing with. Let's deal with that and move forward. So we're trying to be more proactive. But a lot of that is education, right? And people really understanding that there are ways to help, right? And assistive technology is so good these days. So when I did mention dyslexia, right? One of my first gentlemen that I worked with not too long ago, he was in his mid-30s. I think I might be dyslexic. He says, I can't read. So he was like, when my wife comes home from work, she works 40 hours a week. They had a 5-6-year-old. They put him to bed. And then she would read to him every night so he could study. You can imagine that didn't feel good for him. Probably didn't feel so good for her. It was hard in their relationship. And I was like, well, how about if we get you a laptop that has, the assistive device?
Speaker. Yeah.
That's right. We can go from text to audio. You can listen to that. He's like, what? I told him about an e-reader pen so he could follow along in his books and his sheets. And he had no idea. You know what the first thing he did with that pen was? He went to the grocery store because he wanted to be able to buy new things that he wasn't
Yeah.
accustomed to before. So I think a lot of times people just don't know those supports are out there, and they can be life-changing. Not only do they
Uh-huh.
help with the support of your life at home, they help in your schooling, which helps in your work, which can even help at your, your life at the grocery store, what you're eating and what you're interested in. And sometimes you don't even know that that barrier is there, and then that
Yeah.
it can be helped and taken away.
Well, there's probably, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, 'cause I'm not a professional, but there's probably a sense of shame or embarrassment to actually say, oh, I'm an adult, I have a job, I do well, I feed my family, I got my kids, but actually I struggle all the time on something that seems like it would be a very basic, easy thing for most people. So there's probably a sense of fear of coming out. Um, I can't even imagine on the job site, in a safe space like with your organization, it's probably like, okay, this is private, this is between us, yeah, we're good. But that would be a much more difficult situation to say on the job site because the fear of ridicule or fired or whatever it is. Do you encounter that a lot?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's hard. So we always encourage disclosure, right? Because we
Mm-hmm.
feel like it's better for people to be able to say, this is what I'm dealing with, this is my issue, this is how I feel, so that the
Mm-hmm.
employer, the coworkers are aware. Also, so that they're helping, pave the road for people coming behind them to know that that's okay. But you're right. It's the stigma. It's that feeling of feeling inferior or whatever it may
Mm-hmm.
be, right? And especially when you get into a lot of the trades, um, you know, the trades
It's a
are
bit rough and tumble.
rough and tumble, big and strong, like
Mm-hmm.
all of those big feelings. And then all of a sudden you've worked all this up a lot of times in your mind because you can imagine if you're embarrassed that you can't read. That would
Yeah.
be embarrassing for some people.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't necessarily want your coworkers or your boss to do that, right? So there's a lot of
Mm-hmm.
masking, there's a lot of hiding for sure. But as you mentioned, we are apprentice or client first, so we would never disclose a disability
Right.
without being told that that's okay. We do have e-learnings on how to disclose a disability and the importance about it and all those sorts of things, but a person really has to be ready to do that.
Now, the framework that they use for schools, with the accommodations, do you feel that there would be a similar, future state where it would be almost the same for anyone going into a workplace where you just show up on day one with your resume and your interview and kind of be like, also, page 3 of my resume is my accommodations that I have had my entire life. And this is what I've done in the past to help me succeed. If is this possible? If not, maybe I don't apply here. Like, I don't know. I'm just trying to envision like what would be like the best case scenario of this follow through from you know elementary school, high school, trade school, work.
Yeah, well, that's beautiful. And I love that. And I wish that was, welcomed at every workplace. It's not. The
Hmm.
funny thing is when I applied here to CCRW, the question was, how best would you like to do your interview? Do you want to do a document? Do you want to like a document explaining yourself almost like a
Hmm.
letter? Do you want to
Yeah.
do a resume? Do you want to do a video? Like how can you best describe yourself and show your best self? And how beautiful is that to be given an option of, because
Yeah.
some people aren't that great face to face.
You can expect my
Some people,
memoirs in 4 to 6 weeks. No.
yeah, right. And some people may be like that. But I think it's a great thing to be able to have that. And I feel like with disability confidence, that's going to help employers feel better in that space. We've heard a lot about EDI lately, right? Equity, diversity,
Hmm.
inclusion. We're all about adding accessibility to that because where does the accessibility come in for people with disabilities? And we're not just talking ramps and a grab bar and a bathroom,
Hmm.
right? We're really talking, can the words be bigger? Can the lights be dimmer if that's what people need, right? We're just looking at small things that are going to help that individual. And you're not wrong with saying, and, I'm Kerri, this is who I am, and this is what's helped me in the past. Can we work on a program or something to be able to come up with something that works for both of us, that I can bring my best self to work and make it also great for you as an employer.
Hmm. Now, statistically, with 27% of people being declared as having some form of disability, I would argue that 27% of business owners are likely also within that realm. What could we do, you and I? What can organizations like ours do to maybe find more champions of the cause? People that have succeeded, probably had help, probably got to a position of power or of ownership or of leadership, and perhaps could be those mentors, those examples of, hey, look, I got help. I am doing extremely well. I have a big company, number of employees. Can this be an example, or is that needed? Do we need those mentors? Do you guys have mentorship connections or programs? And are there the business leaders kind of stepping up in your world?
So great question, and thank
Sorry,
you
I'm
for
just
opening
throwing
that.
ideas
No,
out there.
it's so good. It's so good, and that's a really big piece of what we try to do, right? Is we're really trying to open up the eyes of employers, mentorship all the way, right? It's a beautiful thing, and how do we, pave that way? How do we say, look, I've been there, I did that, and look at where I've come, and not too long ago, I was at a Women's Day event, and this lady stood up, and she was the owner of this beautiful restaurant, and she said how she had started off in the trades, and it was a trades event, and there was about 70 other women in the room, and they just looked to her, and she said, these are the things I came across, and they didn't think I could do it because I was a woman, and my high school teachers didn't think I could do it because I only got 65 in English, and all of these things, she's like, but look at me now, and I'm so happy to give back to the people in this room. And I think that's a huge piece. And when people don't disclose their disability, it makes it a little bit harder. But when they do, then we have more of that, full circle connection. And we're always encouraging our clients to give us testimonials. We're always encouraging our employers as well to do the same, because I think more people who know A, what a disability is, B, what an accommodation is, and that it doesn't have to be scary, and how we can piece all that together, then it's going to be better for everybody.
I 100% agree. Like I think that's I believe in mentorship. Apprenticeship is technically the spirit of mentorship, of having
Absolutely.
a process of being mentored by a journey person, and I think that's really, at the end of the day, whether you want to give it a label or not, is sort of how we succeed in anything, is that we have a leader for us to help guide us to where we want to get, even if it's a tiny step or a giant step. It's sort of just the way the world works. And there's nobody that can say they got to the top alone. That's just not how it works for anybody. Now, for your organization, when people are reaching out to you, or say a school or an individual, do you, or does the CCRW have in-house kind of their own owned programming that they do as these wraparound services that you mentioned? And if so, kind of some examples of what they are. And then the second part of the question is, do you work with collaborations? Are you looking to also, guide to say, this isn't actually, we don't have that, but hey, Bobby's association over there has that.
Yes. So two-part question. I love that. Yes, we bring people in. We do lots of e-learnings. We even have VR now. So, the virtual reality mock interviews. And we're really trying to work on our virtual reality piece as well. We also have many different resources throughout our communities. So, we often will send out for tutoring, or we send out for certain counseling, or if people need help with housing, or if they need help with childcare. So we have a lot of great networks that we can
leverage.
Exactly. So we're also always looking for resources, right? So we always start with, yes, we're going to help you. And then we'll figure out, with our funding, is this an area we can help with? Yes. Great. Are there some other things outside of that, but there's other places that can? Absolutely. So we work with a lot of community partners, and we're very much, we share, we cast the net, and we say, how many people can we help? It's not like, oh, this is my person, that's your person. It's no, how can we help our clients succeed? And how can we help our employers be comfortable with that space? And we often try to have, maybe just one lead. So, you don't have 10 people knocking on the door all the time. But always just trying to look at for the best for that client.
Okay, that's awesome. We are already past a half an hour, just like that. Like literally, this is flying by. I love this conversation. So let's take a quick break for our sponsors and advertisers, and we'll be right back here with Kerri from the Canadian Council on Rehabilitation and Work on the CWB Association podcast.
The CWB Group is excited for our upcoming CanWeld conference on June 12th and 13th in Toronto. CanWeld is in collaboration with FabTech Canada, Canada's largest metal forming, fabrication, welding, and finishing event. Our CanWeld attendees have the fantastic opportunity to attend our technical sessions, networking events, and to explore the FabTech exhibit floor with tons of product demonstrations. The CWB Association Welding Podcast will be recording episodes on site in booth number 11057. Make sure you stop by and check us out. For more information on how to register for CanWeld, visit conference.cwbgroup.org. Hope to see you all there.
And we are back here on the CWB Association podcast. My name is Max Ceron, and I'm here with Kerri. And Kerri, you can drink your water. That's okay. I'm still talking. It's all good, We get thirsty. I make people talk probably more than they're used to on any given day. So, right before the break, we were talking about, all these wonderful connection points that can exist either within your organization or other organizations that you can help guide people to. And then also the entry points for whether they're just getting started out or already within their journey and having trouble completing, which I see a lot of in welding. Many, many welders start off going to school. Very few get a red seal comparatively. And honestly, as a teacher, I would say test anxiety or problems with the written exam are 80 to 90% of the problems. The physical skills is usually the easy one to knock off the list, but that written test can be a real challenge to a lot of people. And understandably so. I mean, I've even argued that the apprenticeship program shouldn't be using multiple choice and these are exam type questions that we've learned through education and the study of education that we know are very difficult to manage through even without any, barriers. They're not a great way to test people. And I think that there's some catch up that needs to happen with the apprenticeship model in terms of the testing. Now, one of the ideas is the concept of universal design within learning, that you just build things so they're accommodating by nature to everyone already. You don't have to take it apart and rebuild it. The one will suit it all. Does your, agency, do you have communications with Apprenticeship or the CCDA or CAF or those other organizations to say, hey, we have seen this recurring problem with our clientele. Is there something that can be done on your side of the fence to help with this? Because I know those roads are difficult. I've been on trade boards. I'm a part of the CAF. I go to these things, and I know it can be difficult to move those boulders. But do you try?
Absolutely. Every single day. And I am part of CAF, the Canadian Apprenticeship Forum. I sit on their JEDI committee, which is Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. And I really try to talk about accessibility as much as I can. And we do talk to the interprovincial apprenticeship boards. And some of them are a little more forward thinking than others. So we work with that as much as we can, right? And so, our whole program, this whole point of the government funding is we're finding these apprentices, or they're finding us. We're looking at what are their barriers. We're making stories out of that. We're dissecting that. We're like, what? Well, when did this start happening? And where were these stop points? And how can we get past out of whatever that might be? And we're really trying to figure out, like, where do we go for this, or from this now? And presenting to the CCDA, presenting to the federal government, these are the issues. These are a lot of your barriers. Maybe some of the testing is a little archaic. Maybe some of the, the need for accommodation, the proof that you need for accommodation is a little bit, you might have the best welder in Canada, but because they can't have 30 minutes extra to finish their exam,
Yeah, or have a reader or a translator
or
or
have
something so simple. Yeah.
any of those things, which seems like, why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you allow that, right? And this person is kind of stuck in that realm and not getting to that red seal trade designation. So we are trying to build every single day. We're reaching out to new community partners, or just rebuilding our relationships with different trades organizations and community support groups throughout Canada.
Now, what if somebody, this is just theoretical, popped in my head, but what if someone's in a workplace, like you said, I've been working for company X for 10 years, they're putting pressure on me to get my red seal, which does happen in some businesses. Like, hey, you want to move up to supervisor, or hey, you want to do X, you'll need to get that red seal in order to do so. And I cannot, or I will not, because I am afraid, and I get fired. You know, those stories do happen. I've seen them happen in industry, and there's always some backstory that you're not aware of from the outside. Now, if someone like that comes to your organization and says, I just got fired because of these accommodations, or I couldn't get accommodations, or I don't know what's wrong, what can you do? What? I guess there's two sides to that. Like, what can we do to help the person? But I feel like it's almost like, can we do something punitive to the business? Like, why are you being so mean? Like, what are you doing? Like,
and I mean, there's a duty to accommodate, right? There is a duty to accommodate, and it makes it hard. So, I mean, the question you're asking, I think, too, also relates back to red trade seals and that apprenticeship, and it's different for every province. And sometimes people will sit, just as the gentleman I mentioned, for 21 years in an apprenticeship. But I just had another gentleman not too long ago who, first day of school, he gets there, he doesn't have a place to sleep, he's 7 hours away from home because he had to drive so far to get to this school, he can't read, and he has nothing, he has no
There's
money,
just layer after layer after layer,
so many layers, and he's now there in that classroom, right? But they told him if he didn't come to the schooling, that his apprenticeship was over and he's going to lose his number. So, now they've extended it, and we're working with them, and trying to help with the assistive technology to help with the reading and that sort of thing. But imagine all that stress that happened around that time of him knowing.
How are you going to learn in school when you got all this weight on your head,
Right. And that's why we're really trying to look at that proactive piece, right? So say if that gentleman had known, or the teacher had known about us 2 to 3 months before, when, they were getting signed up and getting ready, then all of that stuff could have been in place. So would there still have been some anxiety around that? Of course, we're not going to make everything perfect. But if we can give that gentleman or a person any of the tools they need, and I don't mean like, hammer tools, but I mean any of the tools, learning tools, or whatever that may be, then we really want to be able to do that, to set them up for the most success. But when you ask about like getting fired from a job, I see it too, Max, and it's sad, it's awful. I mean, we're not punitive. That's not what we're doing. We're here to educate, and we're here to help and assist, and we never want to see that happen. We're hoping that people, the duty to accommodate
just aren't like that.
Yeah, we just hope that as the accessibility rules come out and everyone understands
the awareness increases,
Accessibility Canada Disability Act really is, and that will be enforced, which will be good. But yeah, there's still definitely some gray areas. Unfortunately, there are some gray areas.
Well, and I think the trades sometimes is a little behind the times. Not all. I find that many of the unions have done amazing work in trying to stay really up to date with the advances in society to try to make this just more equitable for everybody. And I wouldn't even say it's altruistic in nature. At the end of the day, there's like, we need workers, right?
Yes.
And like, I mean, you could put a halo on a lot of things, but it sort of comes down to business at some point, where we need X number of hands on tools, and we got to look everywhere. And if 25% or 27% of the population could possibly be an employee if we just did X, well, why are we not looking at X? And I think about that for many things. I think about that for equity groups. I think about that for rehabilitation for people coming out of incarceration or the penitentiary systems. Like, I mean, I see opportunity for people that are really struggling in this world to do really well in the trades. And that comes from a very personal place for me, because we were exiled refugees when we came to Canada with nothing. And the trades, my dad was a boilermaker, I became a welder, and we've had great lives.
Yeah.
With a billion barriers in front of us, no language and anything. All we did was get involved with the trades. Like, it was just that. And that was enough to restructure an entire generation of our family. And I see all these people. It's like, you can get in there. There's work for you. Like, we're waiting for you. What do you need? You know?
And I think a big part of it too is the understanding, when you mentioned it, you had all of these barriers and trying to remove them. And at CCRW, they've been around for over 43 years and always working at trying to remove barriers within employment. But now it's looking at a career, right? We're helping to get apprentices to that red seal trade for really good careers that, there's a demand for. So how can we truly do that? And looking at such things as neurodiversity, right? Nobody talked about that 10 years ago. I don't even know if anyone talked about it 8 years ago, but I can tell you it's on the rise. And if we look at our statistics, we have a great research team behind us at CCRW. And every quarter, right, they're asking us all these questions and they're putting all this information together. Mental health is really big in barrier. And also it's learning disability or learning difference, right? And that neurodiversity piece comes up time and time again, which can have an effect on testing.
Right.
But also...
then it's hard to quantify.
Right. But then people that are neurodiverse, they also tend to spend an immense amount of time on detail. If you want, 10 screws in your barbecue, they're putting 10 screws in the barbecue and they're going to be equally spaced. And your weld joints are going to be perfect because they're paying attention to that detail. Right. Yeah. So, I mean, is it even neurodiversity? It's just a different way of thinking. And even when we say
it's like those memes, that ADHD is actually superhuman powers.
And why isn't it?
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, why isn't it? Yeah.
And so if we just think about things a little bit differently, I think that Canada as a whole, but especially the trades, can really benefit from this, rise in the things that are rising, such as neurodiversity. We just got to be able to look at it a little different. How can we make that inclusive? Not have people stuck between their level 4 and the red seal trade exam for 5, 6, 8 years, but how do we close that gap and how do we make them employable and inclusive
and confident?
Right? Absolutely.
Once you have confidence, even a seed of confidence, it really changes your outlook on everything. Because people that are struggling with some type of, barriers in their lives in the workplace, you can just remove the in the workplace part of that sentence. They're struggling with those same barriers in every aspect of all the things they do, from, buying groceries to driving their car to whatever, doing their taxes. It doesn't matter. That barrier didn't just appear for this test today. This is something that is a part of who you are as a human being, just like having blue eyes or long hair or whatever it is. And what do you need to make it happen? And it's going to help everything. And that it just boosts your self-confidence, because you probably have been feeling pretty poor about that for a long, long, long time,
Absolutely. And I think that even just brings us back to understanding what a disability is and that it's okay to have a disability. And one, of course, of our intake questions is, do you identify with a disability? And if someone says no, right, then that's not what we do. We may be able to, give you other resources and, help direct you that way. But there was this one lady and I was like, I'm just going to call her and have a little chat. And it was, I don't know, a bit into our conversation. And she said, can you just hold a minute? She was at school that day. And she said, I wanted some quiet. And I was like, yeah, no problem. She said, well, I don't think I have a disability, but I'm a victim of domestic abuse. I have PTSD because of that. So post-traumatic stress disorder. I have a clavicle that will never adhere. I have pins and screws in my shoulder. In my shoulder. So I have limited mobility. I had 2 fractured vertebrae. So I have low back pain, sciatic pain. and I also have ADHD. I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
but you don't have a disability. That's fine. Then if we call them all barriers, which we can't
Yeah.
do, how do we help you with that? Right. And I forgot to tell you, she's automotive in the automotive
Yeah. Yeah.
technology. So now all of a sudden, she's in awkward position. She's bending over. So not only are we trying to get people into the trades, but we want to
Hmm.
retain them in the trades. So we don't want
Yeah.
them just to get the red seal trade,
And then get
exam
hurt.
and be
Yeah. Yeah.
right. So we were able to get her an assessment, a functional capacity evaluation with an occupational therapist and a physiotherapist. They were able to help. These are some bending and lifting techniques. These are some ways that we can work on strengthening the shoulder. She's still working with them on some abdominal and low back exercises. We were able to get her some tools that were lighter, looking at things that had rollers on them, different things that were able to
Hmm.
accommodate her on the job so that her job was easier because, right, I forgot to tell you too, her doctor told her that she was going to be in pain, but she was just going to have to live with that.
Lovely.
So, right. So we were just like, yeah, no, you don't have to live with that. Of course, I'm not going to be able to help take away all your pain, but if we can give you all these tools, and I don't mean just physical
Hmm.
tools, right? But like the education part of that too, of just posture and awareness and ergonomics, look how much better that's going to be on you, right? So we're really trying to look at the person as a whole and, how can we set them up for success?
Well, and in that example, I think it also shows that that person, she herself was unaware that what her barriers were actually bigger barriers than she wanted to maybe admit or even accept, or she was just so used to living it. It's just so
Right.
part of everyday life that, well, it's not a barrier because I'm living fine. I'm eating, I'm doing things. It's not like I'm stuck in a bed with no legs, or some really, obvious terrible thing. It's like, well, no, I'm good. I'm surviving. But that's not the question, right? That's not what we're really trying to find out.
100%. And a lot of people, and I think back to what you're saying, they say there's 27, or we say there's 27% of Canadians with
Hmm.
disability, but maybe you don't always think that, right? And always know that that number can change any day. Any of us can
Hmm.
wake up tomorrow with a disability, or, we go outside the door tonight and nobody knows what's going to happen. So that number,
Hmm.
anyone can join that group at any time. And that could be any
Yeah.
of us. Um, but another example I was going to say is, as we had a gentleman doing his heavy equipment operator certificate, working to become a red seal trade with that, and he had 6.5 fingers, 6.5 digits,
On one
but
hand,
on one hand, yeah. And
whoa,
so, but he was like,
that's
"That's not a
cool.
disability. That's just that's just my hand."
Hmm.
I'm like, of course, yes, and that is just your
Yeah.
hand, and that's okay. But he was always propping his hand into a 5 finger glove because people only make
Hmm.
5 finger gloves because that's the typical hand.
Hmm.
And we were able to get him a custom glove made, or several pairs of custom gloves, so he could
Hmm.
go do his work in comfort with dignity that actually
That's
had
cool.
something that actually fit him. He wasn't having to fit
Yeah.
into what mainstream is. Something was made for him to feel comfortable doing the job that he was doing.
Now, what happens? And this is an example from me in teaching, where I guess I'll give the example first and see what you think about it.
Okay.
I had a student. He was a great student, really, really upbeat kid, lots of pizzazz. He made us laugh a lot. He was a great kid, but he was, I would say, very close to blind. He had a very, very serious vision issues. His glasses were incredibly thick, and he really struggled. And now welding is very much dependent on vision. Many jobs actually require eye tests in the field when you get up to a certain level, or else you can't apply. There's a visual acuity part of some of the jobs out there. So he was really struggling. We were trying everything we could think of. There's cheater lenses, they're called, for welding helmets, which help. You can buy them, and they multiply the size of what you see your vision. You can buy them; they go up to 5. So times one, time we went right to 5. It was still not enough. We tried different helmets, but then they wouldn't fit over his glasses. And then he got sports glasses made for his. It was we were trying. We reached out to some groups, optometrists, and had them come in, and we were trying to do the best we could do because this kid really wanted to be a welder. But there came a day when we had to sort of think, like, is there something in the welding related trades that interests you that perhaps is not this? Because I understand your passion for wanting to be welding and building these things, and we love that. But we're not finding a solution. We're trying, but we're not finding a solution. So can you perhaps, because computer screens weren't a problem for him. He could get maybe AutoCAD or design, or maybe you could be on the other end of this trade where you're helping build the things in in a drawing. Or we had these conversations and we really struggled. I remember, like, in the office with the other instructors, we're all just scratching our heads trying to figure out, how can we make this kid succeed? He wants to, we like him so much, but he can't see. Like, we don't know what to do. What would you do, or how could I approach you and say, hey, we got this kid, we're at our wits' end, and not for lack of trying. Will you come to the same conclusion as us and say maybe something else is in your ballpark, or would it be, let's just keep trying, or both? I guess a mixture of both.
Well, I think at some point you have to be a realist. And if there's a barrier that really can't be removed, and I mean, there's so many wonderful things. I feel that in most situations we can really, try to find something. But, there are cases, just as you mentioned, as an accessibility consultant in the trades, I see a lot, but I'm not the expert on everything. So we also have a sister company called Nova, and often we'll have them do an advisor assessment. So they'll come in and they will do kind of that next level assessment. They have more of an international reach, and they have a great research team behind them as well. We're all about research, which is really good. And just to kind of, same thing, troubleshoot, bounce ideas. Have you heard more about this? Have you had more about this? And sometimes you do just have to, maybe redirect. But for the most part, I think if we all put our heads together and we all really try hard, we usually can come up with something to be able to make that situation better for the individual.
Yeah. And it's really disheartening to see people want something and struggle to achieve it, because for some it's so easy, and for some it's not, and you just want it to be the same. I mean, that's the concept of equity, I guess, is that it's just the same path for everyone in the end. What about, I'm just throwing all these examples out there of like, what if, but if you are, what'd you say, 43 years, the CCRW has been around?
Over, yeah.
Yeah. And you're federally funded. Are you direct a federal branch, or you're?
Sorry, no. CCRW is a not-for-profit, but the program I'm working for Apprenticeship, that piece is federally funded.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, as all federal funded programs are, there's a lot of like, we're going to give you money, but we want the data, right? Because
Absolutely.
That's generally how it works. That's how government works, and how it should work, because that's how they make decisions. With the CCRW and the apprenticeship program, how are you trending, like, with the amount of people coming in versus the amount of funding available? Is this a thing that's going to be around for another 40 years? Is it a program that's going to be, sometimes programs get cut, things get shifted, or are more clients coming in, more people getting help, more wins? Is it trending up?
So my crystal ball never seems to work well enough. I mean, I feel, and of course I'm very passionate about this, there's so much more room. I feel like, as I mentioned, every day we're making new connections. We're really trying to pave the way for people with disabilities, for people of equity priority groups, for anybody who's having any sort of barrier in the trades. And we all know there's lots, and we all know that we are in dire need of bringing more people into the trades in order for it to be a successful Canada, right? So from all the things that we're finding, with the high number of mental health, with the high number of learning differences and learning disabilities, even just being able to understand physical disabilities and how we can, bring that into the workplace and be okay with it. I think we've learned so much through this apprenticeship program. I can't see it going away anytime soon. And when you ask, kind of about the funding for it, we have the funding there. Some people, like I mentioned, the lady with the measuring tape, she was a $35 touch. Sometimes we had people come in and all they need is, they just need some tutoring and they need a study plan because, their exams in 6 weeks and they can't figure out how to study it. And we can sit them down and say, guys, look, this is, what this looks like. And here's a great tutor and we can cover that. Or sometimes we have tutoring that's complimentary as well because it's his own, equity or entity. And that's great too. So the touch doesn't always have to be big or expensive. So the funding is there. We're looking for more apprentices every day. My hope is that we get to like the top of apprenticeship so we can be like, hey, government, these are the things that we found. Now,
and as soon as someone walks in the door, that's ready.
Yeah, can we go and do more? And can we make it so that every province or the CCDA has like that framework to say, oh, you have, people with disabilities or equity deserving and priority groups. Here's some things that we can work with to be able to make that an easy kind of come in the door. We're already ready for that.
That's awesome. I love it. So one of the things that I haven't gone to yet is actually just asking you some questions about yourself because I'm curious. And when I said it before the show, I saw the look of fear on your face, being like, "Oh." But Kerri, like, how does someone, and because this is the other side of the story, you are involved in our steel trades, you are involved in apprenticeship now, inadvertently through your work, you are now a part of our world, right? And a lot of what we do on this podcast is talk about all the different pathways and touch points of these industrial trades. Now, you are a part of our industrial trades family. Whether you ever thought you were going to be a part of that or not, how did you end up in this role? What sort of tools, if someone's listening and maybe they're a welder right now and maybe they're doing very well and they're thinking, I would love to help. Maybe I could go work for a company like CCRW. Maybe I can start my own not-for-profit. What skills and tools does someone like you have to have or has to do your job? And I guess, how did you get to sit in the seat you're in?
Well, I can say that I feel like anybody can do anything if they put their mind to it. And with
good answer.
Very
political.
various supports through communities, right? I think that's exactly what I was supposed to say. My parents always told me I could do anything I wanted, but I started off doing kinesiology, so the study of human movement. I worked for many years in physical rehabilitation, and I specialize with people with acquired brain injuries, and with people with moderate to severe disabilities. But now that you're supposed to have a favorite client, my favorite client that had an acquired brain injury, he was actually an electrician and he got hurt he was in a car accident coming back from a job. And so I worked with him for a very long time. And through that, I saw his job be taken away. I saw him having to rehabilitate himself. And then I went on to work into community health care, which is a big thing in Ontario, community health teams. And I was a health promoter there. So really trying to help people that had any sort of chronic condition. So sometimes it was disability, sometimes it was more related to, education around osteoporosis or diabetes or things like that. So it could have been physically working with them or educating. And I loved all of that. And then I just love what CCRW does in helping people with disabilities. And when the opportunity came to work within the trades, I really felt like, like for that favorite client of mine for many years, I would love to advocate in that space. I think it's such an important space to be in for a variety of reasons. I also think it's a hard space to be in because there are a lot of, those biases that are already
you have barriers professionally to get over.
You're not kidding, right? So I think it's a hard place to be in to talk about disability. But I welcome that challenge, and I really just truly want to see the trades succeed, and I want to see people be able to trade or succeed in the trades. So anyway, I can help people do that. I feel like I'm.
So you've been a fixer right from the beginning, eh?
I guess, yeah. That's a good way to put it.
No, that's great. That's great. And it's a very defined line. And it's very interesting how your interaction with someone from the trades, watching, I guess, a downward journey, which is something hard to watch at any point, kind of inspired you, to kind of do what you do today. And that's wonderful. I've seen workplace accidents. I've seen people get hurt, lose their jobs, or come back with, what did I say once? Don't call them accommodations, call them empowerments. Someone come back with the
Love that.
empowerments that they needed in order to do their jobs, but it still wasn't easy, right? Because there is no easy. That's not an easy situation, period. So let's put easy aside and let's do the work that needs to be done, right? Type of thing. And when you look at that spectrum and the biases and all the things that need to happen, I think it's a big uphill battle, but it's not necessarily that it's one big hill. It's a lot of little hills spread across a wide plain. You know what I mean?
Yes, that's a great way to look at it. Yeah.
And so, like, it's just one at a time, we'll take them out and we'll work through it. With all the trades that you work with, and there may not be an answer, but which do you feel perhaps is the most successful in getting people into back to work or to cross that finish line? Is there a trade that you're like, hey, you know what, this one we got a lot of stuff for, and then there's a trade that's like, we haven't cracked that nut yet?
I wish I had a great answer to that question.
Yeah.
The trades are so vast as well, right? There's
yeah.
55-ish trades in most provinces, right? And just what's a trade in one province is not necessarily a red seal trade in another. So and different provinces handle things differently.
Yes.
And if I told you the provinces that handled things the best, I might upset some of the other provinces. So I think as long as
I know.
I think if we all just try to do the best that we can, and I think we talked earlier about some of the old school thinking. I think a lot of that's coming down.
It is.
I think people are taking it down, and even though some of the accommodations that we provide through that social model, if the social model is not recognized at the testing end and it's the medical model, then we can't really help that so much. So, but you're seeing a lot more of that medical model going away and the accommodation being able to be there. And COVID did help that a little bit with being able to. I was going to
ask what the bump in COVID did.
Yeah, so it helped with that, online schooling and testing. And now in a lot of provinces, they're working on getting that red seal trade exam done online. So, I've talked to a lot of the apprenticeship agencies in provinces, and they're not really sure because also, then if it's 3 hours for that test, then that's only 3 hours for that test, and there's no way around it because it's on a computer and it's timed.
Standardized, yeah.
Exactly, unless they do have that special accommodation. So, there's different ways to look at it. I guess we're gonna, figure that out too as we go through. There'll be bumps in the road, I'm sure, but I think we have a lot of people now listening and now really trying to understand, how can we make it better and how can we move forward with trying to make it barrier free.
Awesome. All right, we're almost at the end of our interview. I want to ask a couple questions to kind of wrap it up.
Yeah.
The first one is, and I want you to dream big here. What's the end game? Like, what's the perfect state of this? What would be the process from start to finish, from like even STEM years, like grade 5 to 7, young person thinking about trades, getting the trades, but they already have an accommodation. This is happening. How does it play through? If it was just to be truly equitable, what's the process that you envision? And this is big. Like, Cole's notes, I guess, but because I think about this stuff all the time. So.
Yeah, I think accommodation is really important. I also think that education in the school, but education at home as well, about that stigma of the trades. You mentioned earlier, you're good with your hands, so you're not going to go to university, you're going to go here. There's so many great qualities about working in the trades. And I think for so long it was like, if you're smart, you're going to university. Not that you needed to or wanted to, I think it's really just making sure that people know that they can do anything they want as long as they have the support. So having that accommodation is great, but maybe they need more than that. We have people now that still go out with an accommodation. Their high school diploma looks the same as the person next to them, and then they get into trade school or university, whatever that may look like, and that accommodation kind of falls apart because it doesn't fit. It doesn't fit the learning style or the parameters of what that college block might look like. But I think I went in two different tangents there, but I think if people are educated at a young age of knowing, that there's so much potential in the trades and if they do feel that they need an accommodation, that is already being worked on and in place, that will help bring success.
Okay, yeah, no, that's when I look at the timeline of start to end for most people, like we've both said throughout the show, no one does it alone. There's always some form of help, guidance, mentorship of some level to get anywhere. If those biases that we have ingrained in society, not even in our systems, but even in our households and the way we communicate with our children about, work and people and differences and similarities more than anything between us all, that would be probably a much bigger step than trying to systematically correct it from the back end, because we're kind of chasing the problem after it's already been created instead of trying to fix it in the beginning. But that's sort of what ends up happening when it has gone this long, right?
Absolutely. And then, we talk about the employers and their responsibility, but we also touched on that stigma and that not wanting to disclose because, the
Right.
bullying, feeling that way. Well, that doesn't usually come from the employer. That comes from your coworkers. That comes from the people that work around you, So I think if all of this is taught from a young age to be kind to people, to understand that, just how you feel is not necessarily how someone else feels. And we all work differently. We all think differently. And that's okay. That's actually really cool because if we all thought the same, we all acted the same, well, that'd be pretty boring, wouldn't it? So I think a lot of it is just, if we can think better, we can believe better, then we can all do better.
Awesome. Last question. How do people get in touch with you? What's the best way? How do people work with your group? If you're either an individual or a training center or whatever, how do people seek out your services and get that help that they need?
Absolutely. So probably the best segue would be go into our website, so ccrw.org. You can find our apprenticeship support program on there, but you can just email the main group, and they will make sure that you get any answers to any questions that you need. We do trainings for employers. We do help with apprentices, but anybody who's looking for upskilling or anybody who's looking to get a job that does have a disability, we're there and we're ready to help. And we're also always looking for collaboration with other like-minded community partners. So always happy to work with people like that.
Well, we're going to be doing something.
I do. I look forward to that
happen.
very much. Yes.
It's definitely something is going to come. And plus, I love the East Coast. So, I mean, as long as my boss approves it, if you're listening, Craig, I need to go out to the Maritimes soon. But
that's right.
I was just out there last year, but it's always wonderful, especially in the summer. But thank you so much for the interview. And I guess for the people listening, from my personal point of view, I have an anxiety disorder that I got diagnosed with probably 30 years too late, that I struggled with forever on my own. And getting that understanding that I even had a reason to have struggled gave me so much more confidence to work on trying to solve that problem. So it's such a big step for people. And I've been very open about my mental health on this show for years now. And I think that it's important to just allow it to be a conversation. Just allow it to be a conversation. It doesn't need to be taboo or weird. We're just humans. It's just normal.
Absolutely. And right, by just saying that and saying it so openly, let's hope that helps other people, give them the courage to be like, oh, really? I can talk about it openly and not feel like I have that weight on my back anymore, right? It's actually
it's like if I broke my arm, I want you to sign it. Like, I broke my arm, cool, sign my arm. Well, I kind of broke my brain a little bit, but like, come give me some kudos, give me some praise too, because hey, we're making it work, right? So it is what it is. It's probably not the best example, but
I know what you mean. I know what you mean.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Kerri. Is there anyone you'd like to send a shout out to or hello or anything like that?
I maybe like to mention NAAW, National Accessibility Awareness Week, that's coming up at the end of May. And that's just really a shout out or sing out to
Mhm.
employers to really try to look around your facility or your construction site or work site or whatever that may be, about how can you make it more accessible and how can you make it more inclusive for the people who are coming in or who may already be there. And our disability toolkit can also be found at our website, and that is a great place to start. And if anybody would like a walkthrough or a talk through of that, there's always somebody there that would be more than willing and more than happy to do that. So reach out at any point, and we're happy to give you any information that we can.
Awesome. And don't be shy, people. Just reach out. You may need it, you may not, but hey, you won't know till you check. So, it's always best to err on the side of caution, and always best to err on the side of education. So the more you know, the better. Well, thank you very much, Kerri, for being on the show today.
Max, thank you so much. It was my pleasure.
Awesome. And for all the people that have been following the podcast, the information for the CCRW will be posted up with the YouTube and the podcast links. Everything will be there to share and to download and to comment on. So if you have any wonderful stories, as always, please send them our way. We're always looking for new great content, and we're always looking for new great partners and great agencies and companies that are doing good things, and we want to spread the word. So reach out to us. You know where to find us, and stay tuned for the next episode.
We hope you enjoyed the show.